us that promise so that we can wait for it to fulfill or to reject, right? And then here, we're like, for the first part, we're going to be just like looking at how we can create our own promises, and sort of like reiterating the state of the promises, and how we can run some code after the promise has either fulfilled or failed. And then after that, I think hopefully we will have some extra time for those that haven't finished the lab to try to finish that, or if you have any questions, to also ask questions. Or fine tune. If you finish or if you submit it, try to fine tune whatever you turn in by adding more either CSS styling or just improving your product. How does that sound? Good? Cool. So, somebody can share with us anything they remember about a promise and about what it is. It won't be an HTTP response, no. It can, a promise can resolve to an HTTP response, but it in itself is not one.
It's like a vow to do something if parameters are met.
Correct, yeah, it's a, as Douglas said, it's a vow for to do something if certain conditions are met. And that is expressed in our programming language, JavaScript, through a class called promises, right? So in the example of that we were looking at yesterday, let me see if I can pull it up. I think it was Ajax. Lab. In the example that we were looking at yesterday, fetch was giving us back a promise that then we could do then on to listen for the success of the request and do that catch to listen or handle the error. So, and then so we can have here, yeah. If you haven't read this, you should. I think the example that Douglas gave was also valid. And a promise can be in one of 3 states, and there's actually one that we're going to talk about later, which is one is the first state in which a promise is pending, as we saw when we were making that fetch request. And we immediately after the fetch request console log the promise when we were looking at it in here. Parsing promise. Here. When we were doing this, let me comment this out. As we were doing it here, we have fetch. Fetch returns back a promise. In this case, we save that promise to something called a response promise. And as immediately after that, we console log response promise, and we saw that that response was pending, or that promise was pending. Let's just look at that one more time. Maybe on Finder. As I have here my console, and I refresh because we're trying to fetch an image. As soon as we refresh, we see that it's here. Again, talking about asynchronous behavior. We see that the fetch.image started. Right after that, we see this promise pending here. is the one we are looking at. Let me close all this. Is this on line 17? As we can see here, the console log belongs to line 17. So immediately after the promise has been made, the state of that promise will be pending. And why do you think it's pending? Like, why would we want to express 3 different states in a promise? Speculate. Why would it be useful to know when it's pending? Correct. Yes, that's actually a great response. Could you say it a little bit louder? Say that. Let's go one more time. Correct. So the pending state is for the JavaScript engine to indicate that the promise is being in that state of trying to be resolved and or rejected. It's doing some work. It's pending. That's the state of pending is an indicator that the request is not fulfilled or rejected yet, but that the process that the promise should do has been started. Right? Okay. The next state in which a promise can be is a fulfill state. When a promise, we want to set timeout. Simulate the time that it will take for Tuple to get to his appointment. So, just going back to that example. What did you see? Well, first, how do you make it reject, Hugo? True. And then what happens? So let's refresh here. After 3 seconds, the promise will be resolved. Well, in fact, it will be rejected. And it says on-caught in promise Huple make it. Huple couldn't make it. Why do you think it says on-caught? Correct. I'm glad they named it properly. So now do a catch. You add the catch. Do a catch and say, instead of displaying the Huple couldn't make it, say console log a different message. Where would you add the catch? Console log something like the promise was rejected and it was caught. Anyone still seeing the on card? Okay, so let's look at those that are not seeing the on card. How do you get rid of it, or how do you catch the error? Pleasure.